Hello, my name's Tom. Welcome to F1 Fantasy 2024. The game has just launched, so in this video, I'm going to briefly go over what's new, what's changed, which isn't a great deal to be honest from last year, but we'll have a look at the couple of things that have changed, my opinions on that. We'll have a look at the pricing for all the new pricing, again, give my opinions on that. And we'll go for a couple of preliminary team builds, pre-testing, so it's a little bit up in the air at the moment, but just my general thoughts and initial reaction to what's going on. So before we get into the team builds, as you can see on the screen, we're going to hop over here. The first thing that has changed is the no negative chip. I think this is a really good change, and it's something I highlighted at the end of last season that I would like to see change. So it's good that that's been changed for the better. So instead of just having the overall total for your driver not dip below zero, it's the no negative is applied per scoring category. So this, in my opinion, makes the chip a lot stronger and will hopefully save a few points this season, as opposed to no negative chip, which a lot of the time last season just did nothing. It did actually do nothing for me last season. So having, whereas it would have actually, because I used it in Australia last year, and I had Perez on my team, he scored the -5 for not qualifying because he crashed out in like Q1 or something. So that -5 wouldn't have counted. I would have just scored 0, whereas everyone else who owned Perez, who didn't use no negative, would have scored the -5, but because of his overall score was above 0, it just negated it, and it meant I had made no gain using that chip, whereas this year I would have gained. So basically no negative chip is better. The other thing is the transfers. The transfers are now -10. If you want to make additional transfers, you get 2 free transfers, the same as last year. For each race, but if you want to make additional ones, instead of -4 like last year, which is quite a small price, it's now -10, which is, in my opinion, quite a big price. So it's gone from one extreme to the other. While I think this change is potentially a good thing, I don't know. I kind of like the -4 and flexibility to be able to just do what you want. I still was kind of pretty reluctant to ever take a -4, and I did it on a couple of occasions throughout the entirety of last season. But yeah, I do think going from -4 to -10. It's a change. But yeah, in terms of other changes I would have really liked to see, the big thing for me, actually, if we just hop back to the scoring, the game rules, is the -20s. This is probably the biggest thing for me. It's so demoralising getting -20s, and even in a sprint, you're still going to get that -20. And a -20 in the Grand Prix as well, and then obviously disqualification 25 fine. I do think -20 is just way too big when they haven't actually changed the scoring system basically at all. And in fact, I haven't looked through it. It's exactly the same scoring system as last year, purely based off where you qualify, where you finish the race, and then overtakes and positions gain. Fastest lap. So one of the drivers will get that, obviously. So I'm pretty disappointed. I must admit that the scoring system hasn't actually changed basically at all, and it still puts a lot of emphasis on drivers that start far back and then push forward, which is kind of disappointing. So it's going to make those budget guys, the similar sort of budget guys that are good for overtaking, that's good again this year. There you go, you can see down the bottom there, -10 for additional transfers, which is the change from last year. So yeah, I think the main thing I would have changed would be in the -20, and just adjusted somehow to make those budget guys a bit more, points worthy in our team. But yeah, my general reaction is the new game is fine. The real big positive for me is the pricing, I think. Obviously, again, it depends what happens in testing. We could throw up some surprises. My general feeling and thoughts at the beginning of the season, pre-testing, is we're going to see pretty much a continuation of last year. The regulations are kind of stable from last year, so we're not seeing anything new and fancy. It's just teams have just kind of honed in on the best build for their cars. And I still expect Red Bull to be out ahead quite comfortably, and then the likes of Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes, kind of in that pack chasing podiums behind Red Bull. So yeah, I'm pretty impressed with the pricing change. But apart from that, I definitely would have liked to see a few more tweaks and changes to the actual scoring system, but it's fine. It still works. It's fine. Probably the biggest thing out of all of last season was the pricing was totally wrong, and my first impression is the pricing is better. So let's have a quick look at what's going on with the pricing. We'll have a quick scroll through with me. So Max Verstappen at 30 million. Bear in mind we're starting with 100 million. We're all poor again. The budgets of 140 million or whatever we ended up with at the end of last season are all being reset to 100. I feel very poor having a team full of budget drivers again. But yeah, Max Verstappen at 30 million obviously takes up 30% of your starting budget. It's quite a big chunk, but you can still put the 2x on him. So my initial reaction is probably a good thing to have him in there. You compare that to the Constructor Red Bull. So Red Bull coming at 27.9, compare that to 30 for Max. So if you ignore them 2x, obviously having Red Bull at 27.9 seems a lot better deal than just having Max Verstappen at 30, because it's cheaper and you get to cover pretty much all of Max Verstappen's points plus Perez's points. So Red Bull Racing on the surface looked great, but being able to 2x Max Verstappen still is a great boon for anyone that wants to go that route. But I think we'll see a lot of variation in teams because of this pricing this year. You can't just triple up. This time last year it was triple Red Bull, triple Aston Martin, put your budget driver in, we're good to go for the first 7-8 races. This year I think we're going to see a lot of variation, so I think that's great for the game. But yeah, because you can 2x Max Verstappen, I think we're still going to see a lot of people do this, but I think we will see quite a few people go this way. And let's percentage picked straight off the hat, 28% compared to 50%. So look, people are already probably going for the Max Verstappen 2x build already, because it's probably not very clear who the best 2x is other than Max Verstappen. It's pretty obvious that Max Verstappen is the best 2x, but then it's also pretty obvious that Red Bull are going to be the best constructor as well. So is it worth just getting them? But then if you bring in a Red Bull constructor and Max Verstappen, the rest of your team is just absolutely like poverty stricken. So it's going to be an interesting one, and I'm going to see lots of divergence on that, and we'll see, I'm sure, lots of people, seasoned pros of the fantasy game, going one way or the other, and it'll be fully justified either way, I think. But yeah, my initial build has got Max Verstappen as 2x. I think 30 million is a pretty reasonable price considering everyone else is, apart from Lando, everyone else is like a third cheaper than that, basically, 20 million and fewer, less than that. So next on the agenda is Lando Norris at 23 million. That's a massive price hike. I can't remember exactly how he started last season, maybe around 10 million or something. Obviously, McLaren came on so strongly at the end of the last season, and I anticipate him to sort of continue that. Already some good, strong words coming out of the McLaren camp heading in to test him. I think Lando Norris at 23 million is probably fine, but when a lot of people are going to be having the likes of Max Verstappen and we've only got 100 million budget, I think his ownership is going to be pretty low. You can see it's 27, which is actually not too bad. But yeah, it depends if you want to go with the Red Bull constructor. For example, you could, on this build here, I could get Lando Norris in, and that enables me to actually do perfect money to get in Red Bull Racing and then put Lando Norris as the 2x. I really like the look of this build as well. You got exactly the right amount of money, so obviously at the beginning of the season anyone can do this build, and I quite like it. I'm not sold on the Alpines. I'll speak to them about them in a bit, but let's carry on with the with what's going on. So in terms of Lando Norris being 23 million, probably potentially a little bit overpriced. I do like to get those kind of underpriced assets to kind of grow the budget at the beginning of the season. But so yeah, I think Lando Norris is probably a fair price, but it's not an exciting price in terms of owning him straight away. Perez at 20.8, like almost 10 million than cheaper than his teammate, is quite a big difference, but probably fair enough given last year's performance. Is Perez going to be better again this season? He started off the season really well last year, so 20.8. If you want to go for a build that, for example, that wants to double up on Red Bull assets, you've got a team like this, you could 2x Perez if you trust him. So there are definitely options. That's what I really like about this game so far. My initial reaction is there's plenty of options, so that's great. So yeah, Perez, to be honest, we can probably group all these guys together here. So we've got Perez at 20.8, then Lewis just a little bit less, Leclerc at 19, Oscar at 19, George at just under 19, Sainz at just 18.5, just under 19. So everyone in this little group, it's like the developers weren't really sure who's going to be the best, and the truth is we don't know who's going to be the best out of this group, so they're all kind of similarly priced. So you could argue that maybe going with someone like a Carlos Sainz, who's likely to go up in price, whereas someone like Perez or Hamilton, if they don't start off well, will likely drop in price. Might be a good place to start. But yeah, it's really hard to know who's going to be the best here. So, whoa, excuse me, I haven't done do one of these videos for a couple of months, and my voice is already going. Yeah, it's hard to know who's going to be the best pick out of this bunch of people. And it also depends on your build. If you want to go with like an expensive second constructor instead of Alpine, I don't know who you can even really afford it. If you want to go McLarens, that tightens you right up to one of these budget guys all the way down here, like a Nico Hülkenberg. And suddenly, when you don't have like a Hamilton in here, you're suddenly looking at like 4 pretty budgety average fantasy assets in here. But it depends if you want the second constructor to be really good or not. For me at the moment, I'm going to go with the cheaper option in terms of Alpine, or potentially even RB, Visa, blah 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 blah, vitamins and carbohydrates as Ricardo calls them. Yeah, so I'm not sure who the best option is out of Alpine and RB. At the moment. Obviously, we'll see a bit more in testing, but I do think Alpine are probably underpriced, and I think RB are probably underpriced. RB, AlphaTauri from last year came on pretty strongly, particularly towards the end of the season. They're very reliable, whereas Alpine haven't been particularly reliable, I would say. Throughout last season, quite a few DNFs, reliability issues, and that. If those sort of things have been sorted out, which I'm hoping they would have got some of those things sorted over the winter, then Alpine could certainly be a budget builder to start off the season, which is why I kind of got in with them initially. But I do also think that RB, Visa, Cash App, blah blah blah, whatever they're called, could be a good option. So, and they're almost identical pricing, so yeah, kind of interesting there. Let's hop back. So yeah, that's that group of people. Then we've got Fernando Alonso at 15.8. I think that's pretty fair, but it's also a bit awkward in terms of fantasy. That price is just kind of already got 32% ownership. People are just already thinking of that a year ago. But yeah, I do think that price is a bit awkward because it doesn't really line up with anyone else. It doesn't really slot into any sort of team builds particularly easily. I mean, I guess you could. I don't know what we could do with it. But yeah, to be honest, Fernando Alonso, I think it's a fair price for him. I don't anticipate Aston Martin to be great at the beginning of the season like they were last year, but we'll see what testing brings, and you never know. 15.8 could be a steal, but at the moment, not particularly interested. Lance Stroll at 10.7. Again, if you can fit him in somewhere, that could certainly be a good option. Again, towards the end of last season, sort of second half of last season, Stroll really did tail off and he wasn't very reliable. But in general, in previous seasons and at the start of last season, Stroll was definitely a reliable asset, and 10.7 million could also be a pretty good price for him. So we'll see what Stroll can bring. And then you've got the two RB, Visa, Cash App, vitamin carbohydrate team. Ricardo and Sonoda at 9 and 8 million. I think these are pretty good prices. I like this pricing, and I think they could also be really undervalued as well. It could be about right, but they could also be undervalued, and getting them in your team could boost up your budget as well. So I like the price and asset price and points of Ricardo and Sonoda. The Alpines, like I've already commented on their constructor, I think Esteban Ocon and Gasly are also a little bit underpriced. I would say I think Alpine are probably a little bit stronger than what this 7.8 million gives us, and no one's really confident, as you can see. Lots of people picking Gasly 49% over Ocon 18%, probably because Ocon did terribly in fantasy last season, a lot of DNFs. But is he going to continue that trend of DNFs this season? Probably not quite so bad, so Ocon could be a really good steal at 7.8 million. Albon coming at 7 million, it's kind of surprising. In fact, look at that, 65%. People trust Alex Albon. In fact, it's probably the highest pick, isn't it? Yeah. Next along is Max Verstappen at 50%. So 65%. Everyone loves Alex Albon at 7 million. It does seem like a great price. He's a really reliable driver. He's a really good driver. And who knows what the Williams can produce this season. I think at 7 million, as long as it doesn't break the rest of my team, which I can't imagine it will, I think 7 million is a great price, and I probably will have Alex Albon on at the beginning of the season. Guan Yu Zhou similarly overtake King more or less last season. He did really well in overtakes, tailed off a bit towards the end of last season, but 6.6 million seems like a great deal, which is why I brought him in here. And then past that, you kind of got the chaff at the bottom here. Bottas, Hulkenberg, the Hazards are not going to do much, I don't think. And then Logan Sargent, if you're really strapped for cash at 5.5 million, but I'm not going to be touching Logan Sargent unless I really can't avoid it. But at the moment, I feel like we don't need to go there. We'll see maybe after the first couple of races when things are a bit more clear, and then suddenly we want to jump on different assets, and then Logan Sargent at 5.5 might become an enabler, like a necessary evil, so to speak. But to start the season, I don't see a reason to actually start him in the team unless the rest of the team looks incredible with him in there. But I've played around a few builds, and my initial reaction is I don't really like having Sargent in there. So I've already talked briefly about Red Bull and McLaren. I think the price in here is kind of fine. Similar sort of thing. You've got McLaren at 23.2 and then Lando Norris at 23. Looks like they've kind of got the price of the constructor to be like matching the price of their best driver more or less. So Norris at 23, Verstappen at 30, and then you got Red Bull just under 30. So if anything, Red Bull a bit underpriced, or maybe Max Verstappen is a bit overpriced potentially, if that's what I'm thinking. And then you kind of got around the 19-20 million mark here. Ferrari, Mercedes, similar, 19 million for Lewis and Leclerc, the highest priced assets for them. So yeah, in terms of value for money, the constructors certainly look really good. It's just the 2 times which makes it a little bit of a spanner in the works as to how you wanted to shout the value. But yeah, I do like the idea of potentially tweaking around, and Ferrari being the cheapest out of all of these could be a real steal. Like, I know it's only like $1 million difference, or in the scheme of Ferrari versus McLaren, it's about 4 million difference. So Ferrari coming at 19 million, you could go hard on the constructors It does obviously hamper the rest of your team. I don't know what you can do with that. You can probably just about squeeze in Stroll. I think we've just outpriced to Stroll by point a little bit. Um, so you probably have to go like a Daniel Ricciardo. And obviously having these 4 drivers isn't very exciting, but having the double constructor, and then you'd have to 2 times like Perez or, driver of your choice. If you wanted Hamilton, then you could afford a Lance Stroll in there, for example. You could 2 times Hamilton, who's Mr. Reliable in a hopefully faster W15 this year. So you could kind of go with a team like this. There's a lot of options, a lot of variety, which is great. It's also great for me because it means that it's not just like triple Red Bull, triple Aston Martin, put the 2 times on Max Verstappen and you'll finish in the top 1,000. It's not going to be like that this year by the looks of it. Let's go back to the constructors anyway. So yeah, I do think there's a lot of value in the constructors this year, and I think it could be prudent to have double like expensive constructors that are going to finish at the top end, because once again, the scoring hasn't changed that much. If basically hasn't changed at all from last year, so we're still going to see a very top-heavy fantasy scoring. So people that finish first, second, and third are going to be scoring heavily compared to people that finish like 6th or 7th, which is still potentially great for that team. Imagine like a Daniel Ricciardo finishing 6th or 7th like at Mexico last year. Did great, but didn't score that many fantasy points. So it might be prudent to have these kind of heavy-hitting constructors on your team and go over a cheaper lineup here. It depends what you want to do with the 2 times. Obviously, if you want Max Verstappen for the 2 times, having big constructors down here is not going to be super great. We still can't get him in there. We'd have to really faff around with the rest of our team. 6.1 means we're probably going to have to dip down to the dreaded Logan Sargent. Yeah, so it certainly comes with a price having the double constructor if you also want Max Verstappen 2 times. But there's lots of tweaking and testing to come, so we'll work on it. We'll work on it. Past the big guns, Aston Martin at 13.6 are a bit. Again, in no man's land, like Alonso's price, a bit in no man's land, not kind of disconnected from everyone. They don't particularly interest me unless they storm test them, which I don't anticipate they're going to do this season, but you never know. So my initial reaction is the pricing's probably fine, but as a fantasy asset, probably not for me. I've already touched on the vitamin carbohydrate Red Bull Visa Cash App team, and 8.5 million, and also Alpine 8.4 million. I think these could be great budget builders. So we could, that they could be great enablers to shove in there alongside the Red Bulls. And then we go back to the team I had originally, which Lance Stroll comes in there, something like that. I'm just pulling things out of the hat at the moment. So we go back to constructors. So yeah, I do think having the RBs and the Alpines this cheap could be good enablers in the same way that Aston Martin was a great enabler at the beginning of the last season. But we'll see what testing brings. Initial reaction is they're underpriced and they could be good for budget building, which is important, particularly at the beginning of the season. Past that, you got the Kick Sauber team. Another great name. 6.6 million. Don't particularly excite me. Probably not interested in them. Williams and Haas, again, not really exciting. Haas is 4% ownership. Not surprised. So that kind of covers everyone's kind of pricing and my general kind of initial reaction to it. My initial reaction to the game as a whole is, yeah, it looks pretty decent, basically because the pricing looks really good, in my opinion. It's interesting that they decided to release this the week before testing and not like after testing, but obviously that only gives a limited time before the deadline. We've still got a couple of weeks out before time of recording, 15 days, 1 hour, 42 minutes. So yeah, we still got some time out. So it's nice to have a bit more time to think about it. But at the same time, if testing throws up any surprises, then suddenly these prices are wrong. Suddenly the vitamin carbohydrate Visa Cash App Red Bull team. I'm not going to call them that all season. Oh my god, I think I might just call them RBs, to be honest. Suddenly they look incredibly strong, and they're actually a lot closer to the Red Bull design, and they're like pushing for podiums. Then suddenly everyone's piling on Red Bulls and everything, and it makes our life a lot easier. I don't think that's going to happen, and in the same way that happened last year with Aston Martin, but you never know until testing happens. So it does concern me a little bit that they've released the game this early, but at the same time, it's nice to have it, play around with it. Not much has greatly changed, to be honest, but I do think at the moment, pre-testing, I'm pretty happy with it. I would have definitely liked to have seen some more changes in terms of the point scoring, particularly that -20 for sprints. I think it's just too harsh. I'm not going to bang on about it. Overall opinion is fine. I'm pretty happy with the pricing. So yeah, the pricing is probably the most important thing to get right. And at the moment, pre-testing, I would say they've got it just about right. If you disagree with me, then go ahead and comment away. But That's my initial feelings. And in terms of team selection, obviously I've gone through a few ideas at the moment, but I won't be probably doing too much more until actual testings happen. Then I'll produce another video after testing, and then we'll kind of go from there in the build up to the first deadline of the season. So yeah, that's my initial reaction. Hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know what you think. Do you like the game? Do you agree, disagree with anything I've said today? Do you have any amazing team builds that I haven't kind of gone through? Do you have any dark horses this year? Are you in the Max Verstappen camp? Are you in the Red Bull and Max Verstappen camp like I've got in here? Or are you going to kind of cut your price a little bit, go with like the McLaren or something and upgrade another driver? Let me know what you think. And I'll see you in a week or so's time probably for some more content after testing and before the next deadline. So thanks very much for listening to me. First time back in 2024. Thank you very much. Yeah, catch you soon. Bye for now.